Now, you mentioned a lot, especially in the diaries entries, just about Phil's different moods after games and some quirky anecdotes. I think one of them was just him grabbing a pillow in the middle of the night, and I think another one was him breaking down a screen and roll sequence when he was watching the game with you. I mean, when you look at this book, are there any ones that are your favorites as far as just those quirky anecdotes about him?
I mean, I get to know Phil in a way that most people don't see him. Right. And I just, he's such a great coach and such a great person that I love, sharing stories about him because he's so unique in that way. And, and I'm sure anybody who, is in a relationship, where you share a bed at night, you go through the, you stole the covers, you hog the bed. Well, Phil takes pillows like they're basketballs when I'm sleeping, and he's like, it's like he's still a player, because I know a lot of the generation have only known him as a coach, and they don't realize he played in the NBA for 12 years, and that he still has those dreams of getting rebounds and being the teacher that he is. He's always teaching me whenever we're watching a game, and it might be, it might not have anything to do with the Lakers. It's right. A college game or it's a hockey game, because now in this day of DVRs, he can show me film just as we're sitting home, and he'll rewind something and he'll say, do you see how this breaks down? Right. What the defense did and who missed their assignment. So sometimes I get it right. But it makes it so interesting to, it's a lot of fun being a sports fan, hanging out with somebody that I do believe he could be a commentator on any sport. He just has the way of looking at things. And, a lot of times we'll be watching baseball and he'll say something, and then 30 seconds later the announcer will say the same thing. I'm like, gosh, you could be a color commentator for any sport.
Yeah, it seemed like an interesting, thing to observe when you were mentioning after games. Sometimes he won't shut up afterwards. Yeah. Sometimes it's a pulling teeth exercise. But I think you summed it up where he kind of learned how to respect the space and kind of know and read his mood swings. What's that kind of like?
Well, it's like if people could visualize, when there's a loss, which doesn't happen too often with the Lakers. Right. When they're on the road, now the game is over, the players have to do their interviews, a lot of them, do their icing, their treatments. So they get on the bus, and now it's the bus ride to the plane. And, the bus is pretty quiet. And so if you're on the phone, and Phil's got a pretty booming voice, a lot of times he would call me from the bus, and, he wouldn't say anything because he doesn't really want to talk. And it's kind of like, well, why did you call me if you can't talk? And then that's when I realized he just wants to hear my voice, or just, take his focus off, the game, or ask, give me some input on what you saw. And I always watch our broadcasts, and I let him know what the announcers say and give him feedback. I'll tell him what was trending on Twitter, or if there was I'll just throw whatever I can to see what will help him, or comfort him, or whatever it is. But it's just so funny because sometimes he'll just call me and he'll just sit there, and so we just sit there like, okay, now what does he want to talk about? Yeah, and like he's just like anybody else, you gotta know who's always there for you.
Right. I think you had recounted an anecdote that took place sometime around January, I believe, before regular season game against Houston, where I guess you had caught wind that Byron Scott was going to be in attendance, and that, I guess, somewhat threw you off guard. But you, in another sequence throughout the diary, just the uncertainty regarding whether Phil would come back.
Right.
How do you sum up just what your emotions were last year in terms of just the uncertainty of whether this would be his last year, and just seeing the ebbs and flows and give and take regarding that?
Well, when you are, I mean, because I'm in a relationship with a head coach in the NBA, it's like a whole different viewpoint than what I've known. And so all of a sudden, when you put yourself in the shoes of the coach, you realize like how difficult things are. And so when Byron was let go by New Orleans, there's like a time period in the NBA that is kind of like known as like it's like the beginning of the coach firings. I mean, it's just, every year, 3, 4, 5 coaches get fired, and people, to some people it's like, oh, that's an easy thing to do. The coach has a contract, he'll make money. But it's painful when you're a coach. You're like part of a really small group. And so you feel the pain of, even if it's a college coach or, what's going on with, in football when a head football coach gets fired, like at the Dallas Cowboys, like every head coach feels that a little bit, because it's such a lonely position to be in, and it's a vulnerable position because you're front and center. And certainly, the organization's entitled to let a coach go if he's not living up to their expectations, but it still hurts. These are human beings we're talking about. And so it's just, I guess I kind of wanted to share with people, that no coach is bulletproof in this league. It doesn't matter. You're only as good as your last game or your last season. And, it's tough. It's tough.
Had you gotten a sense leading up to when he ultimately decided he's going to come back? Did you get a sense one way or the other when that was going to, or was it literally when you got the press release and he called you about this, I'm going to go at it?
I mean, I've gone through it once before where he wasn't going to come back here, so it's kind of like I'm prepared, maybe over-prepared. But what I couldn't understand was he wouldn't make a decision, and he was leaving for Montana. And, the thing is, I mean, what's great is when you make it to a 7th game in the NBA Finals, your season goes way into June, and he likes to be up in Montana by the 4th of July. Right. So, there really wasn't all that much time in between the parade and the celebrations to the 4th of July. So he wouldn't make his decision, and he left. And then all of a sudden, I'm kind of looking at the calendar, and I realized that it's coming on July 1st. And what everybody in the NBA was looking at for that July 1st was, of course, the start of free agency and one of the big free agent classes. And I started thinking, wow, is he, for some reason, waiting to see where LeBron's going to go? Is he not telling me, that he's keeping his options open so that maybe he would be a free agent and could talk to LeBron? Come here, hon. I'm sorry. Come here.
That's okay.
That's my little dog princess. Sorry.
Since we're on that subject, you had mentioned Princess a lot in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think during last season when you were providing Twitter updates on her, a lot of the readers on the website were really expressing sentiments and well wishes. How's Princess doing?
She's doing great. She is, I've never had such a, this is something that is completely I'm responsible for, and she's like my baby, and I love her so much. But she got this really rare blood disease, and I had to go through this, 3 months where we didn't know if she would make it. She had blood transfusions, which I didn't even know they did that on dogs. And she thankfully responded to the medication, and this medication was so intense that I wasn't even allowed to touch it. I had to wear rubber gloves in order to administrate it to my 10-pound dog, you know, which if I can't touch it, and like, what's it doing to my little 10-pound dog? Well, it saved her life, and the disease went into remission, but the medication damaged her pancreas, and she became diabetic. And so once we got that under control, within 3 weeks she went completely blind. And to watch, you know, something that you love so much, and her personality change because all of a sudden she couldn't, you know, she didn't know, she couldn't go upstairs, she couldn't go down, she couldn't navigate anything. And thankfully they do cataract surgeries on dogs. So she had cataract surgery. So I asked my Twitter followers to, you know, give, you know, all the positive thoughts to her that day of her surgery. And thankfully it was like just an absolute amazing, you know, procedure, and she's completely healthy, can see perfectly, and she's like a puppy again. So, but she is diabetic, so which means I have to give her insulin twice a day, and you know, that's small inconvenience for the amount of love that she gives me.